Hello my friends, and welcome back to the Eaton Homestead. Happy New Year. I'm popping on here today because I posted something a few days ago about vision planning or goal setting for the year. This is something that Nate and I started doing last year. And when I posted about it last year, we had a lot of people commenting and asking questions. So I thought I would just take a few minutes to sort of go over and share what it is that we do. In case it inspires you to do something similar. We found it to be very helpful this last year, so we're definitely going ahead and continuing with it. So the whole idea is creating a vision for your family. We decided last year to sit down and talk about, I created a worksheet and I made Nate do it. At first he looked at me a little bit crazy. But I think the more that we got into it, the more that he really enjoyed doing it as well. And so what I did is I came up with 6 categories that we were going to talk about, the things that we wanted to achieve in the following year within those categories. So our categories are things like family, marriage, our health, our home, finances, and our work. So this is an example of what our little worksheet looks like this year, and I just took those 6 categories and put them in these little blocks, and we're going to write all around our goals for these categories. I've already started mine. We have yet to sit down together and do this, but I started writing mine out, of course, in matching colors, because that's who I am. But these categories, family is things like making sure that we make time to visit with our friends, and we have a lot of friends that live out of state and we don't get to see them very much. We have friends that have had babies and we haven't even met their babies yet, and that's just killing us. And that's the way that life goes. You just get so busy and you don't make time. It's important to you, but if you don't sit down and put it on the calendar, it just doesn't seem to happen. So that's one of the things that we want to do. We also want to save up for a big family vacation, which we haven't done just in our little, nuclear family. Luna, just getting dog slobber on my notes. Thank you, dog. Work, pretty self-explanatory. So the things that you want to achieve in this coming year with your work. Health is health. So all things to do, I would say, not only with your physical health, but your mental and emotional and spiritual well-being as well. Marriage, working on your marriage is not something that is talked about a whole lot, but I think that we should, just like anything else in our lives, you can't ignore it. You can't ignore your health and expect to have good health. You can't ignore your marriage and expect to have a good marriage. So we, sitting down and talking about the things that we want out of our marriage from each other is incredibly vulnerable and hard. It's hard to do, but I would certainly recommend it. We use the home category sort of to mean our physical home. So that's like the projects that we want to do around the house and, the homesteading things that we want to get into. I have this dream of goats and I, tease Nate incessantly, but I really hope that we can work that into our plan, if not for this next year, in our sort of long-term plan. And then money is all things to do with our finances. And, we entered onto this whole journey, I think, really when we decided to get out of debt, which we are. We have some medical bills that have popped back up thanks to Wyatt being born. And one of the things on our list last year was for Nate to kind of get back up to speed with all of his health stuff. He had a lot of health things that he was dealing with that he just wasn't going to see the doctor for, and he hadn't seen the doctor in 10 years or something ridiculous. So that was one of the things that we put on the list, was that he needed to get back to the doctor, get back to regular checkups, and have some of the things that he was dealing with addressed. So he did that, so that racked up some medical debt for us again. But we had set a goal at one point to save $10,000, and we did that. And people look at me a little bit crazy when we say that, but one of my favorite quotes is Peter Drucker, and he says, "What gets measured gets managed." So I think that's so true, that if you're not measuring something, you're never going to be in control of it. So for me, writing lists and keeping Excel spreadsheets and doing this kind of stuff is what helps make me feel better. And even if I know it's going to take a really long time, I'd rather take those baby steps towards something and celebrate, the achievement every step of the way. I have to throw the ball, excuse me. So one of the big things with this kind of exercise that I would recommend is making sure that the goals that you're putting down are things that you can actually measure. So my best friend and I were just doing this. We got on FaceTime and we're kind of talking about our goals and stuff for the upcoming year. And what's hard is that we tend to think really, really big, and then we need to boil it back down. So, just saying, I want to lose weight, that's great, but how much weight do you want to lose? How do you know when you have achieved your goal, when you've achieved the thing that you wanted to do? So we struggled with this last year because it's really easy to just say, a very vague sort of big thing, but how do you know that you've done it? How do you know that you've hit your mark? So for me, like in health, that's one of the things that I want to do. And, one of mine for health is creating goals like this and creating rewards for myself. So I want some kind of a system. I don't want to manage by, the numbers on the scale, because that's not really motivating to me. And I don't know, I just don't want to be like that. So, I want to challenge myself to work out X number of times a week or do yoga X number of times a week. And when I do the thing that I'm saying that I want to do X number of times, having a reward for that. So rewarding myself to a pedicure if I do yoga, 20 days in a row or whatever. The goals on here have to be tangible. They have to be something that that you can reach. So you've probably heard of SMART goals that are specific, are measurable, are attainable, are realistic, and are time bound, meaning that you put a deadline on it. We struggled with this a little bit last year as well. I put things on there that maybe weren't so realistic. I had a lot of goals for myself as far as really getting into yoga and teaching my yoga classes. I also wanted to get back into running, but when I take a step back and I look back at 2019, Wyatt was born in August of 2018. So at the time that we were doing this, I had a newborn, I had an infant, and it's really hard to get out there and run every day. When I really got into running, Amelia was 3, maybe 4. So it was a little bit easier to get away. We only had one child and she was, much bigger. So it probably wasn't that realistic of me to expect myself to be able to get into the same running routine that I had had before when my life looked so different and I had this little baby at home. That probably just wasn't going to happen. So really taking that SMART goals lens and sort of putting it over each of your goals and asking yourself, am I being realistic? And is this something that I can measure? And is time bound, has a deadline on it. It's taking those big goals and sort of breaking them down into smaller action steps. When we go through this exercise, Nate and I both do it, and then we sit down and we share what each other has written, and then I kind of boil it down and combine it into one sheet, and then I print off that sheet and I put it on the refrigerator. And we look at it all year long. So that's the other sort of really nice thing about this, is there's so many things that just keep popping into your life, and you have to ask yourself, is doing this helping me to reach these goals that I have identified as important to myself? So if you have financial goals about saving money and you put that right up on the refrigerator, it helps in those moments when you want to buy that little shiny thing, whether or not that's truly important to you, and is that helping you reach your goal? Let me throw the ball again. Or if you have health goals, on the refrigerator kind of helps when, you're asking yourself, do I want a second serving of ice cream, or do I need a second serving of ice cream? And maybe sometimes you do, but having those goals right in front of your face every day helps you to determine whether or not you're making daily action steps towards reaching those goals. And I think probably one of the most important benefits of this exercise is being on the same page with your spouse. The first time that we did this, I feel like Nate and I really learned a lot about each other and what we want and what our dreams are, what we want to achieve in the future, that we didn't know, because it's just not something that comes up in everyday conversation. We don't sit around and dream every day. You're living your day-to-day life and doing the mundane day-to-day things. And these sort of big, lofty conversations just don't come up very often. So, taking once a year at least, to sort of have the big conversation was really eye-opening, and I think we both really enjoyed it, and it made us both much more motivated. I've had like 4 cups of coffee today, so I decided it was time to switch to tea. This is a pomegranate mojito tea, and it is so yummy. Anyway, what I was going to say is the big picture. That's the other thing that we do. So I created this sheet as well that lays out our 3, 5, and 10-year plans or vision. One of the things that I do on this to help is I write down how old each of our family members is going to be, so that I can kind of take a step back and think, in 10 years, I'm going to have a 17-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. And that just seems crazy to me, because right now I have an almost 7-year-old, and Wyatt will turn 2 this year, so he's a baby. It's so weird to try and think about him as being a 12-year-old, and I can kind of see Amelia being 17, because she's, 7, going on 17. But just being able to take a step back and try to envision like what your life will look like in 3, 5, 10 years, that's the part that really just gets me like, I don't know. I'm not a big dreamer kind of person. So this exercise stretches me. It's hard. Nate is so wonderfully optimistic and visionary in this way, so he really helps push me to think bigger. And one of the things that we have on our 10-year goal is to pay off our mortgage and hopefully be financially free, just meaning that we have saved up enough money and have made enough of a net worth that we don't have to work the day-to-day jobs if we don't want to, that we can choose the work that we want to do. I think that we'll always be bringing in income in some capacity, but that we have more choice and more freedom around what it is that we do day in and day out. So the homesteading stuff is another big part of this long-term planning, is really thinking about how can we live more self-sustainably in the future. It's things that we are taking little baby steps towards every day. I do not know what I'm doing. I'm learning along the way. I appreciate all of you being here along on our journey. But I'm learning these skills right now as we go. I mean, I've got my einkorn sourdough starter on the counter right now, and I'm just hoping that I can, get it going and keep it alive and begin to bake sourdough breads and sourdough einkorn products that are healthier for our family than, the processed stuff that we're buying at the store. So that's one of those like big, lofty goals. And when you put them down on paper, sometimes it feels like, I don't know how we're ever going to get there. But being able to dream up those big, big goals, the next step is working them down into smaller bite-sized pieces, into year-long pieces, into monthly, weekly, daily action steps. So that if you stick to those daily action steps, you know that you'll reach that goal, just like when we were working to become debt-free. It took us about 2.5 years. Thankfully, we didn't have too much debt, so we were able to do that, but it was 2.5 years of discipline. And I don't know, I tend to be good at that just naturally. I think I'm naturally a little bit of a martyr. I like the pain in a way, and I like the gamification of it, and I like winning. So I set those goals, and then I made sure that we achieved them. But it wasn't without sacrifice, and it wasn't without discomfort, and it wasn't without having to say no to some things. And it's the same way with any goal in your life, whether it's financial or health or relationship related. You just have to make those things a priority and write them down. That's the big one. Write them down. Sit down, talk about them, write them down, and put them in a place where you're going to see them every single day, so that you have to ask yourself, am I working towards these goals? Is what I'm doing right now going to help me reach these things? I'm really excited for 2020. I think that it's going to be a great year. And, you know, we've got some pretty big dreams and some pretty big goals on our lists. But I know that eventually we will be able to get there. So anyway, I hope that this helps. I am going to put both of these printables on the website, on my website, on my blog. I have a blog. There's not really very much on there right now, but I will make them available, just a generic version of them, in case you want to print them off and give this a try too. I would highly recommend it. It has helped our family so much in this last year and helped us to just, you know, be very laser focused in what we want and making sure that we get there. So I wish all the best to you as well. May your 2020 be blessed and full of health and happiness. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you next time.